How do you explain the body in the backyard?
I don't
2.5 feet down, with
know.
clothing
I
and
don't
everything
know.
with it. How?
But I have nothing to hide.
I
I'm
realize
an old
that.
lady. Do you really think I'm guilty?
You want me to be truthful with you?
Yes.
I'm going to be real truthful with you.
And good morning, I'm Tom Duhane.
Hello, I'm Alicia Malaby. It's multiple murder trial of Dorothea Puente.
The grandmotherly landlady is the prime suspect as Sacramento police begin the gruesome task, digging up the side yard of an apartment house.
Burying them in her yard and then cashing their Social Security checks.
Were all found buried in the boarding house yard.
She looked like the woman next door or anybody's grandmother. She definitely didn't look like a serial.
This was big news for Sacramento, and this was the, quote, Bert's landlady.
I think it's turned into a circus.
I found it hard to accept that this friend of mine was a mass murderer.
Police digging in the front and backyards of the boarding house have now found 7 victims, and they fear that more bodies will be located as the digging continues.
This neighborhood has gained a large measure of notoriety since bodies were first dug up in the side yard of this home.
Each day that the verdict or the jury was out, I felt that it was in her favor.
She should definitely get the penalty because I know that she killed those people.
I haven't killed anyone. My conscience is not bothering me.
The jury remained hopelessly deadlocked.
I'm appealing to you, Dorothea. That's what I'm saying is nothing makes sense.
Oh, hi there. Hello, hello, hi. It's my face again. Swoop! Swoop, 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 swoop. Okay, hi, it is so great to be back. So, have you ever had a roommate that was literally just like the worst? Like they leave dirty dishes out everywhere, leave their stank tuna cans in the trash, they pay rent late and then ask to borrow money, always have freeloading friends over, right? Like just, you know, generally acting like an asshat. You know the ones. Well, all of that would be a paradise dream in comparison to the roommate from hell that we are going to talk about today by the name of Dorothea Puente. She's wild. Now, if you're seeing me for the first time, hello. I make docs and short films on unsolved cases, true crime, and social media influencers who abuse their power and manipulate their audiences because, as I always say, it's not drama, it's dangerous. Now, we also dig deeper into the root psychology, and sometimes we take it to Petty University, y'all, okay? We got the uniforms on, because honey, let's be real. Petty is my love language. It is how I express myself, and we stay ready for petty. And speaking of, quick announcement, the brand new official Petty University apparel launch season 2, the summer school collection, will be launching in my next video coming next week. I am so beyond excited for y'all to finally be able to get your hands on the brand new collection. I have been working on this forever. Y'all are absolutely gonna freak out when you see it. It is totally different from the first launch, the freshman collection, which by the way, the freshman collection will be going away when the new collection launches. So if you want any of the original designs, grab them before they're gone, I'm just saying. Okay, we are going to dive into a fascinating and very disturbing true crime case that you may or may not be familiar with. Dorothea Puente, or Dorothea, otherwise known as the Death House Landlady. I know a few people have covered this case, but this is a Swoop doc, and as y'all know, we branch out and do things a little different. We're going to delve into some of the psychology at play, as well as give you ways to identify potential pathological liars in your own life, how you can handle them, and what you can do to protect yourself as well. Now, with all Swoop docs, I will break this down into 3 parts: the detailed timeline of events, inside the mind of Dorothea Puente, and how they closed in on Granny Panny McFace. I'm sorry, I'm still working on a good title for that part. Now, before I go any further, while y'all know I sometimes infuse petty to kind of lighten the mood so as to hopefully like learn something from all this as well and make it a little more digestible, the story isn't light. Like, these are real victims, and I do want to extend my deepest condolences to their families and those who were close to them. No one deserves to be cut short the way these victims were. So with that, we do have a quick sponsor, and then we will dig into the forgotten dark side of Dorothea Puente. So I don't know about you, but I love my coffee. Like, child, sometimes I can't function, but mostly I just love the taste of coffee. Like, oh, it's so good. But my wallet, she definitely don't love the cost of me going to the coffee shop, which is why Javy is a game changer. So Javy is the fastest, easiest, most convenient coffee ever that is better tasting, hassle-free, and ready to make anytime, anywhere, and they deliver it right to your door. So Javy is a delicious coffee concentrate that makes any style of coffee you want, hot or cold, perfectly in just like 3 seconds. I literally just prepare what I want to drink, like iced coffee or a coffee shake or coffee boba, and then I add a shot of Javy. My personal favorite flavor is the French vanilla, and boom! I instantly have the most perfect beverage ever. I mean, honestly, the French, it's honestly delicious. And the best part, Javy is healthier, it's dairy-free, sugar-free, and 0 calories. It's ethically sourced and sustainable, and it's just flat out easier, tastes better, and saves me tons of money on coffee. And what I really love is that because it's a concentrate, I can level up or level down the amount of caffeine based on how I'm feeling. So if you love delicious coffee that comes to your door, saves you money, and makes you feel good, tap my link in the description or go to buy.javycoffee.com/swoop and use code SWOOP to get a fabulous 25% off and treat yourself. You deserve it, honey. Okay, back to the doc.
How do you explain the body in the backyard?
I don't
2.5
know.
feet down,
I don't
with
know.
clothing
I
and
don't
everything
know.
with it. How?
But I had nothing to hide.
I
I'm
realize
an old
that.
lady.
All right, let's jump into it. So Dorothea Helen Gray was born on January 9th, 1929 in Redlands, California, which is kind of out in the desert, about an hour and a half outside of Los Angeles. And she was the 6th of 7 children, and her parents, Jesse James Gray and Trudy Mae Yates Gray, were both like super toxic, alcoholic, abusive, and just like awful parents. Her father was a cotton picker and her mother was a worker, which I can't really say that here, so I will just call it an evening worker. In addition to bringing clients back to the house, Dorothea's mother, Trudy, would frequently travel for days at a time to see customers, where she'd leave Dorothea and her siblings with their alcoholic father. Or she would just leave the kids in a room with some food and head out to party or work or whatever. So classy. And Dorothea's dad was super unpredictable. Now, obviously, alcoholic addiction doesn't inherently make someone dangerous, but he was raging awful when he was drinking, which is obviously not good for children to be around. He also supposedly threatened to unalive himself in front of his kids, and one time he did attempt, but survived. And it's my understanding that he actually fought in World War I and was injured from a mustard gas attack and then passed from tuberculosis, which was a direct result of the mustard gas injury. And Dorothea was only 8 at this time now, and solely in the care of her mother until just about a year later, her mom passed away in a motorcycle accident. So it's just pretty terrible stuff for a kid, right? So now Dorothea is 9 years old and living in orphanages where the trauma continues. She was allegedly SA'd in the orphanages, according to some sources, but it's kind of unclear because Dorothea pretty much constantly lied about who she was and where she was from, like all the time. Like, she would claim that she was one of 18 children and was born and raised in Mexico, for example. According to sources, Dorothea was eventually adopted by relatives when she was about 9 years old and taken to live with them in Fresno, California. So Dorothea lived with her relatives in Fresno from 9 till 16 when she sets off on her own and goes to Olympia, Washington. And to support herself, she becomes an evening worker like her mom. I mean, this is what she's known growing up. This is what she's seen. This is what had been taught to her. So, you know, she's just kind of out there in Olympia doing her thing. And she meets a client named Fred McFall, who was a soldier who had just returned from World War II. Now, he's 22 and she's a 16-year-old evening worker. So, you know, he groomer McGrooms her and they get married. Like, she's still 16, y'all. Like, 16. Dorothea was now at this time going by the name of Sherry. Make note, because she changes her background and story and names like all the freaking time, and she tends to lie, like a lot.
You have potential. You have, oh boy,
And so she starts to lie even more. Like, she says she's a celebrity, an actress, has connections to like the royal family. The lying just becomes a huge part of her. So Fred and her are out in Nevada, and she has 2 daughters that are both immediately put up for adoption. Well, one's put up for adoption and one's given to family members, as clearly she was not going to mother these children. And about 3 years after getting married, Fred has had enough and divorces her. Now Dorothea, full of grace, just tells people that he died because, I don't know, nothing says bitter divorce like fabricating death.
He gave us permission to dig around in the yard and look around. And then we dig, we find what looks like the remains of a human being.
So now that Fred's gone, she's back to evening work, and it's just not paying the bills, or rather, like, it's not paying the bills for what lifestyle she wants. So she starts doing the fraud things. You know, just like casually forging checks and stealing the fraud things. Try out the fraud things. She's 19 years old, evening working, stealing, drinking, and now forging checks. Well, that catches up with her quickly, and she is arrested for forging checks, and delightful Dorothea is sentenced to 1 year in jail, but apparently the jail system was messed up back then too. I know, shocking, because she only served 3 months, and those 3 months were like a masterclass in grifting. You know, it's almost like the inmates are there playing a game of bingo and the cards are like, forgery, how to steal without getting caught. But you know, she's perfecting her craft here, so go prison system, reforming shitty criminals into better criminals. Cool. But you know, as part of her trial, they made her get a psych evaluation, and the doctor who performed it said she was doing like all this lying, stealing, and forging because she attributed her self-worth to her possessions, which I think is kind of like a common thing, maybe not like all the lying, but like a lot of us attribute our worth to the things we have, right? The family we have, kids, our friends, or material things. But the doctor said that she had low self-esteem, which, you know, like her childhood was a steaming pile of crap, so that makes sense. That doctor also concluded she'd probably just do this again and again if she didn't receive some kind of intervention. Like, hello, doctor's like dropping some hints. In case anyone's interested, bitch gonna do it again, so like, I don't know, maybe like keep an eye out. But you know, it's 1948, no one cared about these warnings, so guess what happened? Once she got out of jail, she just left. Like, she was on probation for 3 years, but she just left instead. I'm gonna go! So there was a warrant out for her, but like they couldn't find her, and honestly they didn't really even look. It's 1948, it's not like she's tweeting with geolocation, so I don't know. So it turns out that Dorothea had made her way to San Francisco, where she would get back to evening work and crimes, honey. So now she's going by the name of, and I know I'm gonna butcher this, Tea Singoala Nayarda, and in 1952 she meets and marries, her second marriage, a Swedish man named Axel Johansson, leading to a 14-year toxic marriage. So more fun ensues. Their newlywed bliss wore off very quickly when Axel realized that she was lying about like basically everything. A bitch just be lying, okay? I don't know how else to put it. Her and Axel moved to Sacramento, which is the first time Dorothea goes to the city where she will become infamous. Now, while in Sacramento, Dorothea starts her career in hospitality and opens a brothel under the guise of a bookkeeping firm. Okay, Dorothea, whatever you want to call it. So this way she can be in the industry she knows best, but no longer seeing clients personally. Now, I don't know if you've ever run a brothel, but I'm guessing it might be difficult to keep that information on the low-key from your landlord. Something gives me that sneaking suspicion. Like, this landlord was no different. I mean, like, he thought a bish was suspicious, you know, and he eventually called the cops. So the cops pretended to be clients, like it was a whole shakedown to see if it was a brothel, and of course, you know, ding, ding, ding. And they said, hey, you can't have a brothel. They didn't say it like that. I don't know why I'm talking like that. Anyway, so Dorothea was arrested again. This time she was sentenced to only 90 days in the Sacramento County Jail. But shortly after her release, her and Axel's arguing reaches like new levels, and Axel actually has her committed to a psychiatric hospital after a series of binge drinking, lying, and criminal behavior, and like attempts to unalive herself. And this was at the DeWitt State Hospital in Auburn, California, where doctors diagnosed diagnosed her as a pathological liar with an unstable personality and that she required antipsychotic medication. I do want to break off and step out of this case for just a quick moment and get a bit of, global perspective, because y'all know that's how we do in a Swoop doc. I was interested to know a bit more about pathological liars, and the medical research around it isn't entirely clear, where it seems some cases are attributed to mental health disorders, while some aren't attributed to that at all. But I thought, like, in case any of you feel like there's a pathological liar in your life that might be causing you emotional distress, I wanted to go through some of the signs so that we could better understand, as I think that helps us identify potential harmful behavior around us. According to a medical journal, non-pathological lying is commonplace and not a sign of any disorder. A person who pathologically lies will lie compulsively and without any clear benefit to themselves. There have been some attempts to outline the differences between a pathological and non-pathological lie, but more research is necessary to make appropriate distinctions. A key feature of a pathological lie is that it has no obvious motivation, which I found really interesting. It is usually possible to determine why someone has told a lie, such as to benefit themselves or avoid an embarrassing or stressful social situation, but pathological lying occurs for no clear reason and does not seem to benefit the individual. So the thing that causes pause for me, with Dorothea, is that, as y'all will see as the story progresses, Dorothea actually lies for clear benefit to herself. So I'm not sure if the pathological diagnosis is 100% correct, but the thing is, most of her most egregious lies haven't been told as of yet at this part in the story. While I think the assessment of pathological may have made sense in the beginning when she was just lying about people she knew and celebrity friends and where she was from, which is still kind of self-serving in a way, it boosts her in the eyes of others, but regardless, her lies inevitably worsen to protect her bad deeds the later we get into this story. And according to further research, people who lie frequently are not necessarily pathological liars. The most distinguishing feature of a pathological lie is that it does not have a motive. Therefore, a person who frequently exaggerates stories to make themselves appear more interesting or constantly lies to cover up mistakes that they have made is unlikely to be pathologically lying. These are clear motives that advance particular interests. Pathological lies are easy for others to verify, which can ultimately be harmful for the person who tells them. So real quick, and then we'll get back to the story, here's some hopefully helpful advice on how to deal with a suspected pathological liar if there is one in your life. Avoid engaging the pathological liar. In many cases, we as humans are good barometers. If you sense that someone is lying to you, don't make the person feel comfortable by agreeing, nodding, or laughing about it. A blank stare might do the trick in shutting down the lie. And isn't that the truth? Have you ever just been talking to someone and you're just your lips are moving, but you're just telling lies, bitch, and I know it. And so you just stare at them and you're just You remember when you come into the house late past curfew and Granny's just sitting there in the rocking chair, she don't say nothing. She just looking at you while you're telling your story and she's just Okay, other things you can do. Call them out. Sometimes it's perfectly fine to point out that something isn't adding up. And you can most certainly put it on yourself by saying, for some reason I am confused. Can you explain that to me again? Confrontation does not mean creating an argument, but creating an acknowledgement that the information isn't adding up. For example, your granny would be like, well, gee, you're telling me that you're coming late because you got a flat tire and you ran out of gas, but according to the GPS on my device, you were at the club the whole time. I'm just a little confused. How can the two be true? You know what I mean? Now, you can also play stupid, such as, that's not what I was told. Can you help me understand because I'm a bit confused? Individuals who tend to lie are usually seeking some sort of power over others. If you are able to take a step back and appear unassuming, you can actually become the person on top and coax the individual to explaining things so that you can evaluate it. And then also, don't believe anything until you confirm it. It's always good when when speaking to someone who frequently lies to remain neutral, detached, and focused, you should weigh everything you are being told against the facts. And finally, don't argue or fight with the pathological liar. Don't argue or get into a confrontation with the liar because they will use circular arguing, demean you, and possibly create more lies to use in the future, possibly against you. You will never get to the truth, even with the use of intimidation. It's best to step back, work around the pathological liar, and keep a safe distance. So I hope that some of that info is helpful. If you're comfortable in sharing, leave me a comment and let me know if you've encountered someone who appears to be pathologically lying and like what you may have done to help avoid it causing you stress. I'd be really curious to read that. Okay, let's get back into the case.
Now his disappearance is very suspicious.
Well, you know, I didn't think I was ever going to have to remember everything. And
that's fine.
So Axel and Dorothea, or Sherry, or Taya, or whomever she's going by at this point, they get divorced in 1966. Okay, so Axel gave it a good 14 long years. Don't call him a quitter. But like after all of that, she still uses Axel's last name and rebrands herself as like a nice, sweet Christian lady named Sharon Johansson. So cool. A couple of years later, in 1968, she meets a dude named Roberto Puente. I'm sure you know by the last name where this is headed. Now, I should point out that this guy is 20 years younger than Dorothea. She's 39 at this time, and he's like 19 or 20, and they get married. Ew. Anyways, but it's been speculated that this marriage was really just Roberto's fast track to US citizenship and like not true love. So, I don't know, go Roberto, I guess. Get it. They were only married 16 months before Dorothea accused him of DV, and he ran off to Mexico before the divorce could be finalized. So it actually didn't get finalized until 1973, but this delightful trollop of a lady kept the surname Puente for the rest of her life. Can you imagine being Roberto and you're just like, I just wanted citizenship and now you took my name for the rest, and now everyone thinks when they hear the name, I'm sorry, Roberto, okay? It be that way sometimes. Y'all, you know what? I'm sorry. Can we take it to Petty University real quick? A bitch can't hold it in any longer, okay? Roll the intro. Dorothea, listen. Bring it in, listen. You got caught doing evening work, forging checks, lying, stealing, running a brothel. You got sentenced to a year, 3 years. Like, you're on your third marriage. Like, can you just, I don't know, not? Okay, I'm sorry, y'all. I just had to... Class dismissed. The next dishonest grift Dorothea set out to perform was to run a boarding house in Sacramento for people who needed help who couldn't get it elsewhere. She took in like alcoholics, drug addicts, people with mental health challenges, those displaced, and disabled people. Like, she really focused on the fringe of society where these people might not have had families or had caused trouble at other facilities. And she knew that if she was their caretaker, she could get money from the government as well as set up Social Security money for the individuals themselves. Like, she actually became known and respected in the community by setting up scholarships and funding charities. Now, get this, like, this particular boarding house was at 2100 F Street, which is like really weird to me because this is not the house that she's famous for. That house is literally just down the block at 1426 F Street. She's just kind of making her way down the block. So while she was running this home care facility, this woman even got married for the fourth time to Pedro Montalvo, but it only lasted like a week or so, so I don't know, whatever. Like, I wish the wedding officiant, is that what they're called? I wish the person who does the like, do you take this person, that person, or like the courthouse judge, like just started telling her no every once in a while. Like, she shows up with yet another white dress and the judge is just like, no, Dorothea, no. The real point of this home was the grift. Dorothea always be grifting, okay? Granny grifter be grifting grannies. Well, she's not actually a granny yet, but don't worry, it's coming. Now, the grift here was that she was taking her patients' Social Security checks and cashing them for herself. Now, this home was no joke. Like, it had 16 beds. Now, some were like actual bedrooms where the higher paid patients lived, and the rest were beds in the basement with curtains separating operating them like an emergency room at a hospital. Now the top floor was all Dorothea's, like her living space and office, complete with a bunch of fake diplomas and credentials to make her look like she was somehow qualified to run this place. Real winner over here. Chicken dinner. Great. So when the patients moved in, the rule was Dorothea would help them set up Social Security payments and they would sign those checks over to her so that they could live there. Now, most of these people didn't know they qualified for government assistance, so to them, it seemed like a free place to live. And Dorothea was like, ka-ching, like cashing in for a long time, like many years long, until finally the government found out and they were not super cool with this arrangement. Like, excuse me, no. Now, they only found out because one of her patients was out one day and got arrested and locked up for quite a while, and while he was in jail, his government checks were still being cashed. Like, if you gon' grift, you need to know when to hit the pause button, Dorothea. At least wait for him to get out of prison, and then you could scam him again. So eventually the police got curious about how and who were cashing these checks, because, you know, certainly wasn't the guy who was in prison that the checks were for. So in 1978, she was charged and convicted for cashing 34 of her patients' checks. They gave her 5 years probation, a $4,000 fine, and a lifetime ban from running any kind of home care facility ever again. Now, she also had another court-ordered psychiatric evaluation, and this time she was diagnosed with schizophrenia, which could be accurate or not given the eventually outdated resources and understanding of mental health disorders that they had at the time, and other doctors have kind of disagreed with that assessment, so I'm just putting a pin in that over there. Okay, time for more crimes, honey. So Dorothea was allegedly up to her usual crimes while on probation, forging checks and stealing and shit, but just a year later in 1979, she decided she'd have another go at the caretaker grift, because really, if you get a lifetime ban from being a caretaker, naturally that means you should be a caretaker again. Cool. But as a known criminal in Sacramento, she knew she'd have to rebrand herself again, and this time taking on the sweet little old lady image. She started dressing like an old grandma. Like, she stopped dyeing her hair and let it go gray, put on some granny glasses, the polka dot outfits, and started to lie about her age, saying she was 10 to 20 years older than she was. I mean, this heifer is dedicated to the grift, you know what I'm saying? Ew. But unfortunately, this grifting granny is about to get much, much worse. And then way worse. And then unimaginably worse. Like, and then it's all gonna go to hell over the next couple of years. So buckle up. The first of the worst is when Dorothea meets Ruth Monroe.
Ruth's son, Bill Clausen, remembers his mother fondly.
She was great. I mean, she was my mom. I'm gonna say she's great, but she was. She brought up 5 kids.
By this, obviously, she loves him, and Harold is now in the hospital full-time, and she doesn't have motivation to run the cafe with Dorothea. Like, she's worried about what to do after Harold passes, and Dorothea seizes this opportunity, like the piranha that she has been, and invites Ruth to come live with her at 1426 F Street, which sadly will prove to be a fatal decision.
We moved her in there on Easter Sunday, 1982, and she died April 26th, 2 weeks later. I saw my mom every day from the time I moved her in there. I stopped by there on my way home from work. The last 3 days of her life, she seemed like she was getting sick. And when I went there, I'd noticed that she had a drink in her hand, and my mom didn't drink. So I asked her, I said, "What's that?" And she said, it was a drink that Dorothea fixed to calm her nerves.
So the last day that Bill saw his mom, she wasn't able to speak, and he spent time with her and held her hand.
Mom was laying there. I sat next to her and touched her and told her, I said, "Dorothea's taking care of you, you'll be fine." And she had a tear coming out of her eye, and that was it. She didn't say anything. The next morning, I got a call from my brother telling me that mom was dead.
It's honestly just like so heartbreaking. By the time Bill got over to 1426 F Street, the coroner had already taken Ruth away, and Dorothea told Bill that Ruth had unalived herself, and the toxicology report indicated that Ruth had passed away from an overdose of codeine and Tylenol. And that was the first death at the now infamous 1426 F Street house in Sacramento, but sadly it would not be the last. So now Dorothea sees exactly what she can get away with and starts up her caretaking business again. You know, the one she's forbidden by law to do. That one.
But is it against the law, though? But is it against the law, though?
Yes, very much against the law. But nevertheless, she's got her home care business going again and bringing in people like Malcolm Mckenzie, a former prisoner who came to live at Dorothea's. But this time Malcolm goes to the police and accuses Dorothea of drugging him and stealing his pension checks. Sound familiar? The police investigated, and on August 18th, 1982, Dorothea was convicted of 3 theft charges and sentenced this time to 5 years in prison. So, you know, way to go, Granny Grift. Personal best for prison time. Must be so proud. Now, y'all remember when that doctor said that without some intervention and counseling that Dorothea would do this again? Yeah, well, he was right. Imagine the marvels of medicine. Too bad no one cared.
No. Who did the digging back there for you? Who dug all these trenches?
I think John dug some. I tried, but I couldn't.
Arthritis or something?
No, I have a bad heart and I can't lift anything very heavy.
Okay.
So at this point in the story, Dorothea is now actually in prison, and she's no longer a threat to society for the time being, right? Wrong! So while in prison, Dorothea became pen pals with a 77-year-old man named Everson Gilmouth, and she seduces him through her letters. Like, ew, she's just the worst. So she and Everson, they're writing letters back and forth, and of course, because of the prison system, Dorothea is set up to get out in 3 years instead of the 5 that she was sentenced to. Like, why do we do that, by the way? Like, let me know in the comments, because I am confusion at the prison system. Anyways, Everson is eagerly awaiting her release. He's moved from Oregon to California in his red pickup truck to be closer to her. He's opened up a joint bank account with her, and when she's released, they move back to, you guessed it, 1426 F Street. Yes, the same damn house that she murdered Ruth in. Allegedly, that they still had it down that Ruth unalived herself, but regardless, the same damn house, y'all. For real? I just, like, what is happening? I have so many questions. How does... And you know, a little time goes by and you know who ends up disappeared? Pen pal Everson. Sweet Everson, just looking for a companion, disappeared. Oh, and guess who was collecting them checks for Everson? That fake old bitch Dorothea. That's who. I don't know why I said that like that bitch Carol Baskins. Sometimes Joe Exotic just comes out and he's the worst, and okay, I'm gonna leave that over there. So rewind a sec. So how did all of this happen to pen pal Everson? Well, it's f***ed up, of course. Dorothea gets out of prison, brings Everson to 1426 F Street, drugs him up, and he passes. Now she needs to get rid of the body, but without anyone knowing so she can keep collecting them checks. So disgusting Dorothea hires Ishmael Flores, a local handyman, to build her a box that's, get this, 6 foot by 3 foot by 2 foot for her books. Oh, and she also sells him a nice red pickup truck, ironically just like Everson's truck, for a good price, and Ishmael builds the coffin, I mean box, for her books. Then Dorothea's like, hey Ishmael, like, can you help me move this box of books to a storage place that's like pretty far away? We could maybe use that red pickup truck I sold you. And Ishmael's like, okay, nothing suspicious about that. And then along the way to the storage place, Dorothea's like, hey Ishmael, you know, on second thought, I don't want this box of books anymore. Can you just like pull over here by this riverbank and dump it off the side of the road? Then we can just go back home? Okay, thanks. And Ishmael's like, yeah, sounds good to me. Come on, bro. Like, bruh, like the box is literally the exact shape of a coffin. It's heavy as f***. This woman gave you her disappeared boyfriend's truck saying he doesn't need it anymore, and she's suddenly like, oh, you know what? All these books and things are now junk to me. Let's dump the coffin box on the riverbank and just like leave? Ishmael, like, you know better, Ishmael. Like, don't let old granny panties fool you, Ishmael, okay? We talked about this. I'm sorry. Now, meanwhile, Granny Panties Dorothea kept collecting Everson's pension while writing letters to his family, telling them that he had been sick and she was taking care of him, and that's why they hadn't heard from him. I mean, the actual whole grain audacity. Like, can you imagine how evil that is? So after she had disposed of Everson, she went right back to her boarding house home care grift at 1426 F Street. Like, this house could hold up to 8 tenants at a time, and she'd fill it with the same, you know, fringe of society that other boarding houses wouldn't take. And the rules were very clear. To stay at the house, you give Granny Panties your government checks, she takes out the cost of living, and gives the boarders the rest back. Now, Dorothea had been up to the scheme for a long time, and she knew all of the hacks. Like, she knew how to claim disabilities to get the maximum out of the government checks. But, you know, how could she get even more money? By disappearing them. This chick was literally just cold as ice. Cold as balls, ice, the worst. Now, 1987 was a very busy year for Dorothea Granny Panties McEvilface. Now, the order is a bit hard to keep together because, well, it's not like Dorothea kept a detailed journal of being, you know, let me check my notes. Ah yes, a dumpster-ass garbage piece of trash, but I'll do my best to like piece this together. In February 1971, a 77-year-old woman named Betty Palmer was taken into Dorothea's care. Sweet Miss Betty Palmer arrived, and child, she was a lively woman. Like, I feel like Miss Betty would have been so much fun to know. Like, she had a wonderful sense of humor. The tenants loved her. She just brought a real sense of joy and laughter and vibrancy to the house, which was probably very healthy for the other tenants. After staying at the house for just a short while, things changed for Betty, and like many others, Miss Betty became very ill and was noticeably sleeping a lot more. Like, you know, her whole essence was just sort of sucked out of her, which just makes me so sad. Honestly, every time I think about these victims, especially the, you know, they had lived a lengthy life, and for it to just lead up to this, I just, like, I don't know, if I think about it too much, I get like really emotional about it. So continuing on August 19th, 1986, Betty was allegedly taken to a doctor's appointment, and she was never seen again. And Dorothea spun her usual bullshit, right? Like, she told people that Betty's family had come and scooped her up to go back home. You know, it's likely dreary Dorothea learned that if she just blamed family members, then no one would really think to check up on the person who disappeared, because, you know, why would they? You know, they think they're with their family. But sadly, what happened to innocent Betty was far more disgusting and would become known as one of the most harrowing cases to come out of that house. Not to like compare. It's suspected that dastardly Dorothea likely drugged Betty for a while and took her unalive body to what is now called the death room. It was a separate empty room in the house that Dorothea essentially designated the place to take bodies after the drugs had their way with the victims.
This is what we would call the death room. This is where she brought her victims after she had induced drugs into their alcohol. And she would place them here on the floor.
This is what these rooms looked like back then. Some of these images haven't been seen on television before.
Dorothea initially would leave the victim in the room, but of course you can't leave a victim there forever. So she decided, hey, let's bury the body in the yard. But nasty ass Dorothea also thought about, well, if someone finds Betty in the ground, then they can identify Betty, and suddenly Dorothea's got big problems, because, you know, in Dorothea's mind, ending someone isn't a problem. Oh no, it's the getting caught part that's a bitch. So the toxic cesspool that is Dorothea made the horrifying decision to remove any identifying parts, including the hands, feet, teeth, and head of a once vibrant, innocent Betty. And she wrapped up her remains in the nightgown she was wearing, and in the middle of the night dragged poor Betty down the stairs, making all kinds of noise, as you can imagine, to where some of the tenants reportedly did hear sounds but didn't know what was going on, so they kind of ignored it. Because, you know, like, who's thinking, oh, that must be doo-doo Dorothea dragging our roommate downstairs, right?
The stairways, this is how she took her victims out, right here.
Had some unknown details.
It's always been our opinion that somebody helped her It's just that we don't know who helped her.
Dorothea then pulls her body to the front yard, dug up a hole, and buried her there. And I'm just like, how did no one see this? And then Dorothea got someone to lay concrete over Betty so that no one would suspect anything had happened. And later on, it was discovered that Dorothea had Betty's ID in her possession, but Dorothea had actually put her own photo over the top of it and was using it to cash Betty's social security checks, and may have taken around $7,000 in benefits, which, listen, like, I did the math, and that $7,000 adjusted for inflation would be just over $18,200 today. So Dorothea literally ended poor Betty Palmer for a measly $18,000. Like, how freaking disgusting. Now, remember how I said that this was a busy time for Trash Lady Dorothea? Well, she actually unalived several people in 1986, 1987 alone. Now, unfortunately for time, I can't get into all of the details of every victim because this doc would just be far too long, but I don't want to in any way be disrespectful to them, so I'm trying to at least mention everyone, as these were real people who deserve to be remembered in spite of Granny Panny McFface. So in February 1987, 78-year-old Leona Carpenter was taken into Dorothea's care, and Dorothea actually liked her quite well for the simple fact that Leona was easy to steal money from. But as Leona's health began failing her, instead of helping her get additional medical care, Dorothea ended her, much like Betty, using the death room and then burying her in the garden. And in July, 62-year-old James Gallup was placed in Dorothea's care after he had brain surgery to remove a tumor, if you can imagine going through that and then going through what ultimately happened. Dorothea was left in charge of his medication, which I just, like, I'm sorry, coping mechanism is welling up right now. Can I be petty for a moment? Just like roll the intro if I need a break. Can someone please tell me why decrepit Dorothea was placed in charge of, I don't know, literally any human being's welfare after she had been literally charged and found guilty of financial elder fraud, abuse, aka stealing money from the elderly and claiming to be a caregiver. And not only that, but she was arrested at this exact home on F Street, where people died or disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Like, she got charged by drugging someone in that house, yet Dorothea served a speck of time, got out, moved back into the same house, and did it all over again. And you're telling me that no one was suspicious enough to check in and be like, hey, tried and convicted Dorothea, anyone go missing lately? Boarding anyone lately? Steal any checks lately? Like, what in the actual whole grain, gluten-free, sugar-free, apple cider vinegar with a side of fish oil fuckery is this? Like, how did no one pop by and check in on this? She had a parole officer. Like, do we not hold anyone else accountable in the system for failing to do their jobs to prevent someone like this from doing it again in the same damn house? Okay, I'm sorry for the rant. This mess just really girds my loins.
All right, everyone, gird your loins.
I needed that little comedic relief. Back to the story. So James Gallup is a tenant in the house, and shocking, he goes missing shortly after moving in. Just, you know, poof, gone. And by gone, I mean he was ended and placed in the yard, which at this point is becoming just a mass grave site. Now in October, 62-year-old Vera Martin moved in, and Dorothea moved her into the yard. And in 1987, a 67-year-old woman named Dorothy Miller also vanished from the boarding house, and a 55-year-old man named Benjamin Fink, I'm not kidding y'all, this is so many people, who was struggling with the disease of alcohol addiction, also went missing. And his story is just especially haunting. On one particular night, tenants said that Dorothea took Benjamin upstairs, telling them that she was going to make him feel better. And as you can possibly guess, he was never seen alive again. Now, I want to take a moment and focus on a gentle giant named Bert, as his story really truly just breaks my heart, and it is also a pivotal part of this case. So Alvaro Bert Montoya was born on September 8th, 1936 in Costa Rica. He was described by people who knew him as a gentle bear of a man, and I mean, like, look at him. There's just something so sweet and innocent about Bert that just really touches my heart. Now, sadly, Bert did not have an easy life. For much of his life, Bert was experiencing homelessness and would sort of bounce around from the streets to different shelters while simultaneously living with untreated mental health challenges, including schizophrenia. And it should be noted, there is a spectrum with schizophrenia. It's not something that's ever accurately represented by all the cliches that we used to see in movies. Like, these are real people who just need some mental health support, but sadly don't always receive it, which is why someone like Dorothea just really infuriates me. So in February of 1988, when Bert was 51 years young, he was referred to live in Dorothea's boarding house by his social worker Judy, who had developed a closeness with Bert. Like, she really felt for him and the struggles he was facing and wanted to see him finally cared for. And remember, plenty of people came and went through that boarding house with no issues, and Dorothea, like, in between her heinous deeds, managed to garner a pretty great reputation as being a healing place for the elderly and those living with addiction and those facing mental health challenges, and many medical facilities and social workers referred clients to live there. So sweet, unassuming Judy took Bert to rotten Dorothea's boarding house, and Judy even scoped out the place and interviewed Dorothea. Gross Granny told them, like, all the typical lies, that she had been a nurse in the war, that she was in her 70s when she was actually much younger. Like I wouldn't be surprised if she had baked them a freaking apple pie just for coming by to seal the deal. And things were going well for a while. Like, Bert was thriving in a way that Judy hadn't really seen before. Like, he was well fed, had a clean haircut and clothes, and just genuinely seemed happier here.
Okay, now, can you compare detox to the boarding home? Do you like detox better than the boarding home, or did you like the boarding home better than detox?
Better than boarding home.
Better in a boarding home. Okay. Well, if we could find a good boarding house for you, would you prefer to go there? Okay, we'll try and do that. Yeah, right.
But of course, without Judy or Bert knowing, Granny Grifter didn't wait long and actually listed herself as Bert's cousin with the government so that she could then steal his checks. This goes on for a while, and then one day, Judy just stops hearing from Bert. They had been so close, and so him suddenly not reaching out anymore was odd. So she reached out to Dorothea and, of course, was fed a mouthful of lies. Deceptive Dorothea had told Judy that Bert had left the home of his own volition to go live with his family in Mexico. You know, like the usual, oh, he just got up and left without saying goodbye excuse that she had told so many people before. But Judy was incredibly suspicious, particularly because Judy knew that Bert didn't get along with his family and that he'd never just leave with his brother, especially not without telling her. It was also discovered that gentle bear Bert had told some employees at a local detox center that Dorothea was forcing him to take medication that he didn't want. And so Judy called up Granny Grift and was like, listen, bitch. Okay, she didn't say that. I did, but I felt like it was implied. She said, listen, Grandma, if I don't hear from Bert very soon, I'm gonna call the police. Like, this is ridiculous. And child, what happened next, I have never wanted to slap the wrinkles off of Grandma so bad as I do every time I think about this. So Judy gets a call from some man claiming to be Bert's uncle of all things, who lives in Utah, telling Judy that he came to the boarding house, collected Bert, and brought him to live with him in Utah? Like, bitch. I don't care anymore. Granny Grift could answer the door in some curlers, a bonnet, a floral print sweater, knitting a doily. Granny is getting the taste slapped out of her mouth at this point, okay? You disappeared like the gentlest, most innocent man who just needed someone to care about him, and then you tell these lies? She can catch these hands Monday through Friday and twice on the weekends, because I can't. Okay, back to it. So after getting this highly suspicious phone call, Judy files a missing persons report for Bert in November 1988, which was actually the first report filed for anyone who had disappeared from the home, which is like really sad, but also underscores part of Dorothea's motive of targeting particularly vulnerable groups of people. Like, she knew that society often shunned impoverished people, and quite honestly couldn't care less if they went missing or passed away on the streets. Like, it's a terrible, inhumane issue that still plagues the fabric of our present day society, but I digress. So Judy files the police report, and a police officer was sent to the boarding house. And thankfully, a police officer went to the house to investigate, and gross grifting Granny Panties answered the door and pretended to be helpful. She showed him around the house and even introduced him to the 8 tenants that were still living at the house. The officer asked them some questions, and essentially they all told the same story that Dorothea did, that Bert had just left with his uncle for Utah. But, and child, I have never been more excited for a but. As the officer was leaving, one of the residents by the name of John Sharp slipped him a note asking if he and the officer could meet at a separate location around the corner. So the officer and John Sharp met up, and Sharp told him the most wild, off-the-wall sounding story, but as we know, the truth is often stranger than fiction. Sharp told the officer that Dorothea threatened all of the residents to lie to the officer, and that Bert had not left with his uncle, but that Bert had actually not been seen by anyone since September, which of course tracked with Judy, who suddenly stopped hearing from Bert. But then Sharp's story got even worse. He told the officer that other people had disappeared without any explanation, that there were terrible smells coming from one of the rooms.
This is what we would call the death room.
That his room was directly under the stairs, and he had heard loud thumps on the stairs at night, like something being dragged down them. And Sharp even said that he thought Bert may have been killed and buried in the yard because he had noticed fresh holes in the ground that were quickly filled up with no noticeable work being done to the yard to explain that. After hearing all of this, the officer thought Sharp's story might be credible, so he turned it over to the homicide team for them to further investigate. Thank God. Then came November 11th, 1988, the day it all started unraveling for stank breath Granny. So Detective John Cabrera, another officer, and Dorothea's probation officer, like, where have you been, boo, came to 1426 F Street with 2 shovels to her running a boarding house, which indeed was a clear violation of her parole. Now, while the probation officer and other officer talked with Dorothea in the kitchen, Detective Cabrera searched through the house and found no sign of Bert.
I asked Dorothea, I said, look, I'm going to be able to tell the social worker that we looked and we didn't find anything. And she was somewhat agreeable with that. Okay, that's good. And then I said, I have one more question for you. Can I dig in your yard?
The detective then told Dorothea that based on what Judy, the social worker, had said, they'd like to go digging around in the backyard, to which Granny Panty said, oh, well, I'm sure you have lots of things to do. Why don't I hire some people to dig around for you and you come back in a while? Like, what?
And she says, why don't we do this? You guys go back to the office. I know you have a lot better work to do than to be over here, and then I'll make a phone call. I'll call some people, they'll come over here and they'll do the digging for you, and then you can come back. I thanked her, and I said, we're here, we have the shovels. We'll just go ahead and dig around. If there's anything we put out of place, we'll do our best to get it back, to the way it was. And so she says, okay. And that's when we went outside to dig around.
I just know this detective was looking at her like, what in the whole grain audacity? Just, woman, hush, okay? Now, the 3 men only had 2 shovels, so they actually borrowed one from Granny Panties herself. She's like, here you go. Need another? Anyways, the 3 start digging in different areas in the backyard, and within about 40 minutes, John starts digging up little pieces of cloth and what he said looked like leather. And then his shovel hits what he thinks is the root of a tree, and he's poking at it and smashing down with the shovel, trying to break through it, and he just can't.
So I dig a little bit, and I hit something, which I believe to be at that time a root, because there is a large avocado tree about 10 feet from there, so I figured I just hit one of its roots. And I'm banging and banging and banging on this, what I think to be a tree root, trying to cut it in half, but it won't break. You know, I decide that's not gonna do any good, and I started pulling. And finally, it broke loose. I looked down, and in my hand, I'm looking at it, and I know right away, it's not a tree wood. I had enough knowledge to know that this is a human bone, and it looks like a leg bone, a femur bone.
Listen, you can imagine realizing this thing that you are now holding in your hand is someone's leg, and that cloth was their clothes, and that leather was their skin that you were tearing. Now, the one thing that they realized here was that this leg had been here a lot longer than Bert had been missing, and very close to it, they found a woman's shoe. So they did not find Bert, they found someone else, and that like actually haunts me. Like, if they had found Bert first, like, would they have stopped digging because he was the only missing persons filed? I don't know. So they take Dorothea to the police station and interview her, and oh child, have we got video of that interview.
Okay, so you actually started living there in 1978, and you lived there until 1982, until May when you were sent away.
Right.
And then you got out in September 1985.
Right.
And you've lived there ever since.
Right, okay. I was sent to prison in September of '82.
So first, Officer John asks her her name, and we can already see she's lying right off the bat, but John doesn't know that.
So you have Dorothea Montalvo?
Yes.
And you're also Dorothea Puente?
I was born Puente, and I was married to a Montalvo, and I was married to a Puente.
You were born Montalvo, right?
No, I was born Puente.
Puente. Where were you born?
Redlands, California.
They then get into Bert Montoya and how this all started.
Going back, of course, you know how this whole thing got started was because of this last individual,
right.
Montoya. Now, his disappearance is very suspicious. I can tell you that. Even the things that you said didn't even quite connect with what the other individual told us when she spoke to you. There were a lot of inconsistencies in your statement.
Well, you know, I didn't think I was ever going to have to remember everything. And
that's fine. I mean, I can understand that. You explained that to us. But there's just a lot of inconsistencies.
And Dorothea's inconsistencies and how Judy, the social worker, hasn't heard from him in 2 months, and she was on very good terms with him, and how he wanted to leave the house.
Move from your place. Mm-hmm. He didn't want to stay there anymore. And then we talked to Mr. Sharp.
Mm-hmm.
And Mr. Sharp says he hasn't seen him for 3 months. But you said the other day.
Yeah,
and the social worker hasn't seen him. So who is lying to me? Who is lying to me, Dorothea?
Well, I'm not.
Social worker says she was in contact with Montoya up till about 3 months ago.
Okay.
And she says she has not heard hide nor hair from him.
Well, he really didn't want to see them.
But he'd attempted to, he went to detox on an occasion.
Twice.
Yeah, and he told him at detox, take me out of your home. I don't want to live there. And the social worker was on very good terms with him, to where she was...
Yes, Judy.
Right, and when he all of a sudden disappeared, she started thinking, what the heck's going on here? And then she got the inconsistent things about, you tell me that the guy was from, you didn't know where he went, and then she got a phone call, and she says that you told her he went to Utah. I mean, there's a lot of things, Dorothea, that I don't understand.
I don't know where the man was going to take him.
Okay, but I mean, there's a lot, you see what I'm saying? There's a lot of inconsistencies there.
And then we get to, oh, I don't know, the body they found in the backyard.
The other problem is this. You know, we go and talk to you, be real good about it, and then we ask you for permission.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't even have to give us permission to look, but you were cooperating. You said, sure. You gave us permission to dig around in the yard and look around. And then we dig, and lo and behold, we find what looks like the remains of a human being, clothing and all.
But if it was Alvaro, you know, Bert.
No, I don't think it's Alvaro. I don't think Alvaro, if it was in the ground, would be that decayed. be.
Then he asked about some concrete that he thought was fresh that used to be a trench, and asked about a shed that looked new, and he keeps asking like how long this concrete has been there and what was there before the shed was there.
Plants and garden, that garden area, all dirt and stuff like that. Okay.
But it was so much for me to keep raking
Oh,
up.
I know. Yeah, it would be.
Like, it's clear that the detective knows there's been quite a lot of digging around the property over the past year or few, and some very recent. And he keeps pointing it out and then asking Dorothea if she's doing the digging.
No.
Who did the digging back there for you? Who dug all these trenches?
I think John dug some. I tried, but I couldn't.
Arthritis or something?
No, I have a bad heart and I can't lift anything very heavy.
Okay. So John did most of the digging when it needed to be
Well,
done.
not always. I mean, sometimes I had, what do you call it, casual labor?
Yeah. Okay. Now, getting back to what we find in this hole here, do you have any knowledge of what was in that hole at any time? Did John ever tell you about anything?
John?
Sure. Could he have put something in that hole?
I don't think so. He's had a quadruple bypass or whatever. You know, whatever he does, he has to...
How about Mr. Kelly?
No, he never does. He has a bad leg.
Then finally, he cuts to the chase.
There's one or two things I can surmise. Okay? And that is, Mr. Montoya is dead.
No, he's not.
Okay, I'm just saying, I'm trying to surmise this and then we'll try to clear this up. That he is dead. And that either John McCauley or Mervyn
John
either killed him, or that maybe he met foul play by your hands. That's my alternatives. I don't know. But my other alternative is that the fact that somewhere in that backyard, Dorothea, that he's lying, maybe along with other people.
No.
Okay? And I'm also going to tell you that we had the same information a year ago. A year ago? Yes. A year ago.
Oh, wait, hold up. A year ago? What the devil? John, what have you been doing the past year if you knew there's been bodies in the yard, John? Okay, John.
What I'm telling you is not new to me.
Monday, can I hire a contractor to go in and tear everything down and dig it up to prove to you that there's nobody there?
If any digging has to be done, we're going to do the digging.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
And now he brings up the social security check and that this all seems a little familiar, except now them peoples is disappeared.
We're going to find out about the checks, okay, the social security checks. And I know that your past, you've been in some trouble with, okay? And I remember when you were arrested and you were in the bead.
Do that. I admitted to that to get the trial over with.
Okay, but you still were convicted of it and sentenced to it.
Right.
Okay. The similarities are there. The only thing that's different now is the fact, rather than take something and let it go, you get rid of them, and nothing's ever found. Now here's a man from Costa Rica or Timbuktu that really nobody cares about. Just like Mr. Kelly said. He says, hey, when you're nobody, you're nobody. Nobody cares. So you disappear, you're a transient, or you're a bum, or you're an alcoholic. A lot of people think nobody ever cares.
I cared for him. I bought him clothes. I treated him very, very good.
Have you seen Ben Fink around?
No. I told him not to ever come back on the property.
But he was normally a regular around town. And you know what?
But he's lived in Marysville before.
Dorothea, if he'd have been in Marysville, he'd have been arrested.
And then she says, well, if I had known the body was there, I wouldn't have let you search the yard.
Maybe he isn't there. I want to know. I want you to be truthful
Sir,
with me.
I didn't even know that body was there. Okay. If I had, I would have said, no, don't search the yard, But I had nothing to hide. I don't want to go back to prison.
Well, I realize that.
I'm an old lady.
I realize that too.
I'm trying to get off parole. I'm trying to get my life together.
But Dorothea, all the indications, everything doesn't make any sense is what I'm trying to tell you. I'm appealing to you. I'm appealing to you, Dorothea. That's what I'm saying is nothing makes sense.
Then she goes to, well, I couldn't drag a body, which the detective agrees with.
Yes, I hear this a year ago. A year ago I hear this.
I didn't have him a year ago.
No, not him. I heard about other people. You know what I heard? I heard, hey, Dorothea over at 1426 F Street, killing people and burying them in their backyard. How do you explain the body in the backyard?
I don't
2.5 feet down, with
know.
clothing and everything with it. How?
When you find out how old it is and see that I didn't have anything to do with that.
But then again, Detective John Cabrera says he's been hearing rumors about this for a year.
Dorothea,
Do you really think I'm guilty?
you want me to be truthful with you?
Yes.
I'm going to be real truthful with you. Dorothea, I think somehow you're involved in it. It may not have been by your hand, but it's by somebody's hand. And I think you are very, very frightened right now.
Then he just flat out says it.
I think what you realize is this whole thing is up. I think you realize that whatever has been going on is up. It's over. Because we are going to uncover that yard. And you've lived there. And that's why, Dorothy, I'm saying right now, if this whole thing is up. Am I wrong? Am I lying?
I haven't killed anyone.
Then what happened there?
My conscience is not bothering me. When I confessed to my other stuff and went to prison for it, I was glad to get it off my conscience.
And that's why you'll never rest. And you have no intention of going back to prison. I know that. And I don't know if you would honestly tell me. I don't know right now if you would tell me that if you did,
yes, I would.
You would tell me.
Yes, I would.
I don't know. I think
because I can't take the pressure and stuff.
Well.
Okay, Dorothea, I guess I'll just believe you, because if you did do it, you wouldn't be able to take the pressure and stuff. Like this bitch. They just dug up a body in her yard and she's like, well, it was me. How did that get there?
One thing I need to ask you is, we'd like to dig some more, okay? And that might entail digging up that concrete where those flowers are. Okay, do you have any problem with us digging, or?
No.
None whatsoever? Okay, because you don't have to let us.
Look, I want to get this over with.
Okay.
And there it is. We're gonna do some more digging, and Dorothea is perfectly okay with it. And with that, they release her. Hang on, I'm not sure if I said that right. After this interview, they release her. Okay, I did say it right. Like, what in the actual cilantro infused avocado oil is going on here? Like, they found a body in her yard. They know she's at least a part of it, and we'll just let her go back to the death house till we can dig up some more bodies? I don't know So after Dorothea got a restful night's sleep in her own bed, a large team of crime scene investigators show up with a ton of equipment and like even one of those bulldozer diggy thingies.
1426, and that is one of the occupants, Melvin McCauley, and it's right back there. He's watching them excavate. You can see that they have some concrete right in that area. There's a shed. There's an area in here. Crawl.
Now at this point the word had gotten out, and now the media was just gathering in front of the house while Dorothea watched it all from the upstairs window. Annie Panties then told the detective that she was getting really anxious with all of the media and people around, and asked if it would be okay if she went to the nearby Clarion Hotel to get a cup of coffee. Cool, so not only did Cabrera agree to this, but he said, you know, get your things and I'll escort you over there. And this is important because guess what? This is the last time Dorothea Puente would be at the 1426 F Street house. Bitch took off. So Detective Cabrera walks her to the hotel, and then when he returns, guess what they find? Oh, not much. Just another human leg. At which point everyone else is like, wait, where's Dorothea? Maybe we should like arrest her or whatever? Well, guess what? Granny's gone. Like, she's not getting coffee at the hotel, John. Oh, really? Like, come on, man. Like, I feel like you're better than this. So while some officers are checking the hotel where Dorothea is definitely not at, guess what? Another body is found. This one is wrapped up in blankets, whereas the previous two seem to just have been dropped in the ground. And so 4 innocent bodies were found on the second day. So now we're at a total of 5 people. And the police call the social workers and try to figure out the names of like all of the people that had lived at the house so they could try to match who they were finding. And on the third day, the CSI team tears down the shed in the backyard and find 2 more people buried there, bringing the total to 7 people who were ended and buried in Dorothea Puente's backyard, including Bert Montoya, who had been the reason they were looking in the first place. And the last body to be found was actually the first one she killed, Betty Palmer. Well, not the first, because Dorothea had already killed her friend Ruth and her pen pal Everson before all of this, remember? But what's super disturbing about that is that they never found Betty's hands or her head, which just adds more sad to a terribly sad story. So apparently in the escape, Dorothea took a cab from the hotel to a bar in Sacramento, had a couple of drinks, then took another cab to a bus station in Stockton, California. I'm sorry, the fact that she took a moment to have a few drinks is just wow. But then she took another cab to a bus station in Stockton, California, where she then took a bus to Los Angeles. I mean, I guess in 1988 a little old lady could get away pretty quick, but like how long can she stay gone? Now, by the way, this has now become like a major international news story. Like they were reporting this story like all over the place, and Dorothea is now staying in a motel room until on the 4th night she becomes restless. Like she couldn't even go a couple of days. And so while lost lives are being unearthed from her yard, gruesome, gutless Granny just couldn't effing help herself to attempt one more crime. She had changed her name to Donna Johnson and went out to a bar where she met a retired man named Charles Wilgus. She begins hounding Charles with questions about his welfare checks, his pension, and suggested that they move in together. You know, all the casual things one says to someone that you just met in a bar. Now, for some unknown reason, shockingly, Charles went home thinking something wasn't quite right about Dorothea. Brilliant. Well done, Charles. And get this, like he turns on the TV and, I shit you not, sees a news story about deceitful Dorothea, with the news saying she's been accused of murder and is on the run. So Charles did the only rational thing someone would do in that situation. He asked her out on a date, moved in with her, and signed over his pension checks to her. I'm just kidding. Thank God that didn't happen. No, Charles said, "Oh hell nah, Granny," and called up the news network, giving them Dorothea's location, and the news network handed that information over to detectives, which I gotta say, like, you know, cheers to Charles for doing the right thing, but like also, if you ever encounter a known fugitive who like buried a bunch of people, don't call a reporter, just call the police, okay? So a few hours go by and police show up at the Royal Viking Motel where Dorothea Doo-Doo Head is staying, and of course when she answers the door she gives them a fake name, but after police ask for identification she's like, "Alright, fine, my name is Disgusting Dorothea." I'm just kidding, she obviously didn't say that. She did identify herself, I mean, come on. She got. And you know what this woman said? So while on a plane being escorted back to Sacramento, she told an interviewer, "I have not killed anyone, but I cashed the checks. I used to be a very good person at one point in time."
I used to be a very good person at one time.
Bitch, when? Like, when, Dorothea? I know I'm being a little, like, colorful right now. I do feel really bad for the child Dorothea who grew up with such awful parents, and I fully understand that that could have played a part in her general development, and under other circumstances, I'd be more forgiving of some bad behavior that, like, most people might engage in, but this heifer was smart. Like, she was conniving and supremely diabolical, and she knew exactly what she was doing for years. She knew she was not only conning innocent people, the most vulnerable of people, but she knew that ending their lives was also horribly wrong. Otherwise, she wouldn't have bothered hiding all of it, you know? And when I think about her saying, like, I used to be a very good person at one point, like, that tells me that she understands that what she's done is wrong, that she's not a good person, which would then make me think yet again that her pathological lying wasn't a compulsion, it was preservation. Now, during the autopsies, more of Dorothea's plan came to light. This is when they found that all 7 of the people buried in her backyard had a drug called flurazepam in their system. The brand name of this drug was Dalmane, and it was essentially a strong sleeping pill, and it was the missing piece to the puzzle, like finally showing police how she was able to get the upper hand against victims who were bigger and could have easily overpowered her. So that was now what prosecutors believed, that Dorothea drugged her tenants with flurazepam and then smothered them in their sleep, presumably with a pillow. But just because there were 7 bodies buried in her backyard doesn't mean that's all the bodies though, right? Police started asking the neighboring police departments about unsolved cases to see if there were any others connected to Dirty Dorothea. And sure enough, that body that was dumped by the Sacramento River in the makeshift coffin, box, came up, and they were finally able to identify it as Everson Gilmouth and also Ruth Monroe, Dorothea's friend. So now the police charge her with 9 murders, 7 of them tenants from 1426 F Street. Records show that Dorothea had also cashed over 60 social security checks after the tenants were already passed. Oh, and remember Ishmael, the one who built the coffin box that Dorothea put Everson in, and he helped her dump it by a riverbank? Well, Ishmael was arrested for accessory to murder. Now, he admitted that he built the box for Dorothea, he admitted he drove it with Dorothea and dumped it by the river, and he also said he didn't know what was in the box. Like no, just do not, I don't believe you, sir. I don't. Anyways, Ishmael was released on bail, and eventually, because they couldn't convict Dorothea of murdering Emerson, Ishmael can't be convicted of accessory to murder. So Dorothea's trial was over 50 days long. Like, that is so long. But I guess you basically have 9 cases here, so you have to prove them, and it's gonna take a lot of time. So the trial began at the end of 1992 and finished in 1993, with prosecutors calling Dorothea, quote, the most cold, calculating female killer that the country has ever seen. 156 witnesses testified that she drugged her tenants with sleeping pills, smothered them to death in their sleep, and then hired convicts to bury them in the backyard. So now I honestly don't know what the hell happened in the juror deliberations, but the jurors deliberated for over 43 days. 43. That's the longest in California's history. Like, for real, that is a record. At one point, they came to the judge and said that they were deadlocked. 11 of the 12 thought she killed them all, but one freaking juror thought there was a possibility that they could have died of natural causes. But you know, the judge was like Jordan Peele, nope, not on my watch. Y'all hoes ain't gonna spend all this time and not come back without a verdict. Take your cute little selves back and figure this all out. So now the defense in trial didn't even deny that she stole their social security checks. They didn't even say she didn't bury them in the backyard. Their defense was simply that the victims died naturally and she buried them in the backyard and kept cashing their checks. Now, eventually and thankfully, the jury came back, but with just 2 first-degree murder and 1 second-degree murder guilty verdicts.
Count 4. We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Dorothea Puente, guilty of the crime of murder in the 2nd degree of Leona Carpenter, a lesser included offense of that charged in count 4 of the information. Verdict, count 5. We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Dorothea Puente, guilty of the crime of murder in the 1st degree of Dorothy Miller, as charged in count 5 of the information. Verdict, count 7. We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Dorothea Puente, guilty of the crime of murder in the 1st degree of Benjamin Fink, as charged in count 7 of the information.
Like, what the F? enough, right? Like, I mean, it's so clear that she's guilty of all of them, like, isn't it? I don't know. I think so. Now, in sentencing, the jury also came back deadlocked 7-5 over the death penalty. So in December of 1993, 64-year-old Dorothea was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And
He held back tears until she was out of the courtroom.
You know, it's disappointing. Dorothea is very upset, but the jury worked hard, diligent, and we're going to urge them to vote life without parole, and we think that's how this case should end up. Thank you.
How did Dorothea take the news, Peter? Could you tell us that?
Not real good. Not real good. She was crying.
I don't have any comments to make. Period.
You've got to be pleased, though.
I'm happy and relieved.
she passed away in prison at the age of 82 in 2011. Dorothea never confessed and maintained her innocence, saying that all of her victims had died of natural causes. And you know what? Granny, just be gone, because I can't. Ciao. Okay, it is time for a kitty palate cleanser. Hi, my sleepy pork. Everyone say hi to Pork Chop. He's very sleepy and probably a little perturbed now that I woke you up from your nap, but you're just so cute. Mwah. Oh, did you not like that? Oh, are you giving kisses in the air? So as I mentioned, get ready, all the brand new Petty University apparel summer school collection is coming in the next video. I am so freaking excited for y'all to get your hands on the new collection. I have been working for months and months and months on the new designs. You're absolutely going to love the new collection. It's the perfect touch to add some petty to your summertime vibes and will work great as we move into fall. I just want to see y'all in this new collection so bad. So be sure to tune in when I drop the next video and get your pieces while they last. And just a heads up again, I will be removing the items from the original freshman collection when I release the summer school collection. So if you want to snag any last minute items, you have been warned, honey. Also be sure to follow me on Instagram and tag me in your petty outfits. I love seeing all of your outfits and I'll repost you on Instagram and Twitter. Speaking of, you want to help me with the shout out? You want to help me? A couple of Twitter shout outs from my last doc where I broke down the bizarre Amber Heard interview. If you haven't seen it, it's linked below. First shout out goes to Wicked Meg West, who says, I joined for Petty University and then I stayed for the sheer amount of research that Swoop does. I'll be watching her vids as long as she makes them. Yes, Petty Queen, thank you so much. I'm happy to have you as part of the class. Second shout out goes to Scottish Whiskey, who says, this series is the absolute best way to learn about the trial, a really valuable voice on a difficult topic. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope that it helped give some insight through all of the madness. If you want to be my next Twitter shout out, make sure to follow me on Twitter at SpankyV, linked below, and retweet this video right here. Also hit me up on Instagram, linked in the description. That's where I post most often and respond to a lot of DMs. Oh, you're such a good little pork chop. For all my coffee lovers, be sure to check out my link in the description or go to buy.javicoffee.com/swoop and use code SWOOP to get 25% off and treat yourself to some delicious coffee. I want to again take a moment to send my deepest condolences to the victims' friends, family, and caretakers like Judy for what they've had to endure through all of this. While society has had a long-standing history casting aside those who are without a home, who are living through addiction or undiagnosed or untreated mental illness, they're still human beings worthy not only of life and compassion, but worthy of being remembered when they're gone. All too often, the most vulnerable become the most preyed upon, and when that happens, if their cases are ever actually investigated, oftentimes the one who takes their lives is remembered far longer than those who were taken too soon. So I'm going to take another moment to remember the victims of this awful monster, the ones that we know about, and celebrate their lives. So we have Ruth Monroe, Everson Gilmouth, Dorothy Miller, Benjamin Fink, Leona Carpenter, Alvaro Bert Montoya, Betty Palmer, James Gallup, Vera Faye Martin, and the potentially countless others whose names are unknown. I hope that in spite of what this woman did, in spite of the hardships they may have faced, I hope that in time those who loved these individuals find some sort of healing, and that in time their memories are a blessing. That's it for now. I'll see you in the next one very soon, and in the meantime I hope we're all a little kinder to ourselves and those around us. And when all else fails, stay petty. Y'all got this. Class dismissed. Swoop!